Welcome to the Clifton Worley Show. This week we have Sean Arbow. What's up, Sean?
How's it going, guys?
Man, super stoked to have you on the show. And I'm not sure if everybody knows knows you personally, but they know about one of the company you're behind, Gunstreet Wiring, and we'll talk about that a little bit here in a minute. But I did want to kind of let you just tell us a little bit about where you're from and kind of your background and how you got into playing music, and then we'll go on into Gunstreet here in a minute.
So I'm like a lot of people. I started playing guitar when I was about 13 or 14, and I have an older brother who had a slammer hammer that he got as a kind of a just like to try guitar, and he didn't end up liking it. So I would go and sneak into his room while he was at school, and I was home sick. So I would go play his guitar, and I really liked it. And I think it was about two months before he realized I was doing that pretty much every day. And then so he ended up coming home. I don't know for sure, but from what I remember is he basically ditched school one day and he came home to me playing his guitar. And then with my brother and my relationship, it's that very classical older brother, annoying little brother. And so that turned into this whole kind of big thing about how I really can't touch his stuff and that. But my parents ended up taking me to get my own guitar, which ended up being a first act. We went and found it like just some random department store, and I ended up playing that, and I really liked it. And guitar ended up being one of those things that, to kind of segue a little bit, give more context, is I kind of grew up being really sick. And so there would be times where I would be, at least at that time, where I'd be sick for about like a week or so. So I had a lot of free time, and guitar turned it into that one thing that was like, that really kind of helped me. And it was also that time of when you're really loving music and playing along. I was obsessed with that era of the Doors. So a lot of times I would play along to Robbie Krieger and pretend like I could play the Doors' This Is the End. But so I started playing guitar and I really liked it. And I ended up, that first act like guitar I got was just awful. And it was, I mean, like you would play it for an extended period of time, then all of a sudden you'd look at your hands and it's bleeding because of how sharp those fret edges were. So my parents saw that and they're like, okay, we need to get you a new guitar, because I was really kind of loving it. And then they ended up getting me an Ibanez Geo, which was actually a really nice guitar for what it is. But then I ended up finding out later, much later, that I would joke and say I have monster hands. So I needed a guitar with a 59 or a baseball bat style neck. So I really didn't like that Ibanez. And then I really was like begging my parents, like, I hate this guitar. Like I just can't play it. It hurts my hands. I need a new one. And then eventually my parents also bought me a Epiphone Les Paul Classic, which is like quilted top. And again, that one also has a slim D taper. So it's a nice guitar for certain people who can play that, but with just my style of playing and in my hand shape, I couldn't really play it. So again, most people recognize me and are starting to recognize me. Again, kind of like what you're saying is I'm kind of now coming out of the woodwork for Gunstreet, but I'm getting known for electronics. But if anything, I would say I'm more of a guitar builder, or mainly a modder. I like to pretend I can build guitars, but I can't. But when I finally, after this Epiphone, I was like, okay, I have a hard time playing this guitar. I just don't like it. I can't play it. And before then, I really didn't realize that it was just the shape of the neck. So my parents at this time, and so I was just on the Tone Mob, and my parents are very supportive and they listened to it, and they made the joke of the reason why they didn't give me a second guitar was because they were still paying off those two. So yeah, exactly. And like, no, that's true. That's why we didn't get you that. So they weren't going to give me a guitar, and I tend to be that person. It's like it doesn't. I have my set. My wife says I'm one track mind, so it's like if I know I want to do something, I'm gonna do it full velocity, and that's when I kind of got into modding guitars as in sense of playability. So that's where I would, I'd learn about, okay, what makes a guitar a good guitar, which is, the action height, the intonation, and kind of that. So I use both of those guitars as a platform to kind of really, push them to what they could be, minus the fact that I couldn't play it because it's a thin, tiny neck and compared to my hands. So, and then, I maxed those out as much as I could, and it just still didn't like it. And my parents, I was begging for a new guitar. And my parents were saying no, and they really couldn't give it to me. They really wanted to, but they just couldn't afford it at that time. So, I just kind of kept going. And then somewhere along the lines, I thought, okay, I'm not going to get a new guitar. I'm probably never going to get the guitar I really want. So I'll just build one. And that's where I kind of got into guitar building. I originally wanted to build a Les Paul Standard, which for your first guitar is it's a big step. And even like I recently just built one last year for like the first time. I had a little bit of hiatus of playing guitar and building guitars, and I built one for the first time in a long time. But I decided not to build the Les Paul Standard, not because it was very complex, but just because it was kind of out of my budget. The way I wanted to do it was like a really beautiful, I wanted the really pretty flame top, the one-piece body, and all that. And it ended up being like, as much as my car's worth to play. And then, so I figured out, okay, I can probably build the Les Paul Junior. And I factored it in. It's like, okay, it's going to be $30 a month. And I can build it over a small set of times and build it from like, okay, you do 1 month, it's the fretboard, 1 month's the neck, and keep going. I knew it was going to take me a while just because of not knowing what I was doing. And a lot of times other things came up. And then my parents now listening to this love to tell the story about the main reason why it took so long for me to build the guitar was because I am somewhat of a perfectionist. In some it's really funny is I'm really detail oriented on certain aspects, but at the same time I'm that like spacey professor who like can barely keep his shoes tied. So my dad loves to tell the story now of how when I was building the Les Paul Junior's neck, so I ended up figuring out, okay, I know I need a fat neck, and I found a vintage photo, or not a vintage photo, but a photo of a vintage Les Paul Junior, and then I used the reference of my Les Paul Classics fretboard, like it was like 1/4 inch, right? So I put that to scale. So I figured that out, and I figured out that that's to be that shape. And then I ended up trying to build the neck, and the first one was not very good, at least to my standards. And then my dad loves to tell me that I ended up building 5 necks, and he's like, after the second or third one, I couldn't tell a difference. So I ended up taking a year and a half building that guitar, just taking my time and having fun. And then basically right when I was about to finish that guitar, all I had left to do was just the action and to set it up. My parents got a little bit extra money, and they wanted to do something really nice for me. And at that point, I was out of school I quit going. I got really super sick my freshman year of high school, and then this is all the way to I should have been a junior, and I had been out of school for that long and basically didn't leave my house for that set amount of time. But they really wanted to, they talked about someone and was like, oh, well, you should try to give him more motivation and to try to do something to push myself. So they ended up getting extra money for me to quote unquote go back to school and to get me out of the house and go hang out with my friends at their house and play music. So we ended up finding this 2005 SG Faded, which was, I got really, really, I always talk about like how doesn't matter the shape. You can have, a whole bunch of batches, and every single one of those guitars will be slightly different. It just happens to be the one that I got played so perfectly. It has the perfect, fat neck that I need. The action is surprisingly low for just stock. I mean, it was a phenomenal guitar, and I got really lucky with that. But I got that guitar. I took all the measurements off of the string height, the bridge placement, all those kind of things that also really make the guitar itself. And then I used that on my Les Paul Junior, and then I ended up finishing that guitar. And so I got my SG so I got it for my birthday / towards the end of the school year. So my birthday is in May, and I ended up getting right around there. And then every year my uncle comes to town from California. And so he's also a guitar lover, and he helped me a lot about learning about guitars, and also kind of helped influence my parents on getting me some guitars. I think, if I remember correctly, he's the one who actually told my parents that I should try to get an Epiphone instead of that Ibanez. So he was like someone that I to this day, I look up to him because he's such a cool, unique dude. But he ended up coming, and he brought one of his super, super high-end guitars. And then at this point, like, the most expensive guitar I've ever played was my SG, which was, I think of that time, it was cheaper than what they would sell for brand new nowadays, and it was like $600, I would believe. So that was like the most expensive, and he brought his like $3,000 Gibson guitar. So it was like, I didn't want to touch it, but I was looking at that thing. So he ends up bringing it in the beginning of the week, and he puts it up in our little makeshift band room that my parents let me have, and then we're just in our normal kind of what our family always does when they show up. And there'd be times where you can just do whatever you want because in between plans. So my uncle would just go disappear into the band room, which was just our garage. And then he was just starting to play, so I was going to go sneak in there because you could sneak in there without him realizing. And I went in there, and he was playing my Les Paul Junior. And he didn't realize that I was in there because the amp was just, it was loud, and it was really, it was one of those moments where it's like, I probably have exaggerated in my head so much because it's one of those things I've thought about so many times. But when I snuck in there, he was playing my Les Paul Junior, and the way he was playing it was just like, it's the way I look at guitars, especially when you find those guitars that are just so unique and so kind of cool. The way he was playing my guitar and looking at my guitar kind of changed my perception, and it was like that aspect of like something I could physically make can have such a distinct kind of reaction, and such a positive reaction, and it really changed how I approached a lot of things. And I always wanted to have. I come from a family that's, again, super business oriented. Not my great grandfather, but my grandfather taught actually business classes at our local college. So it's like business was always that one thing. It's like, okay, you're always probably going to have your own business, or at least be an entrepreneur in some form or way. So I always knew I wanted to do that. But when I saw my uncle play my guitar, is like, okay, I'm gonna be a guitar builder. If that's what happens when I build a guitar for someone, like that's what that sensation I want to feel. And then that's kind of where it turned into. For a while, I wanted to be a guitar builder, and then wiring harnesses kind of came later, and actually kind of came into through. So I actually didn't say this is a Clifton exclusive here. So I built the guitar that summer, and then I want to say the late summer, I was started. So where I'm from, you have like a big kind of outdoor culture. We're in the middle of everything, so we have mountains on one side and all that. So I used to go mountain biking with my friends, and we were mountain biking on this really big downhill trail. Like it's a really popular one, and it was a 23-mile trail, and I was going down with my friends, and we were going through this. And this trail is in the sense like a really, you kind of have to know what you're doing, because it's very sketchy. On one side, there's an 8-foot cliff. On the other side, there's just like trees, or just like bushes that you can't really stop. So we're going down this trail, and about 3 miles into it, this guy was a cross-country rider, what you'd call, was going up the trail, which is nowadays it's technically illegal, and he could have gotten a ticket for it. So I'm going down this trail full speed, and there's a blind corner, and I take this corner, and I see this guy coming up with a bike. And he didn't see me, but I saw him, so I put my brakes on, I slanted over, and I actually fell off the 8-foot cliff, and I ended up landing on my wrist, and I shattered it. So one, being a stupid kid, and probably a mixture of being in shock and or adrenaline, I rode the entire 20 or 17 miles left on the trail, and I was fine. And then I actually didn't tell my parents that I did that for about 3 months, until we ended up the way that I ended up going to see a doctor about it. Because what happened was, because of the way the doctor said it to me, and it's been so many years, I might be wrong, but basically because of how bad I broke my wrist and I didn't tell anyone, and it kind of healed itself, but really poorly. It caused a ganglion cyst, if I remember correctly. So I ended up having this tennis ball sized, essentially tumor in my hand. So I had to have really terrible surgery. So I ended up doing the surgery, and then I lost mobility in my hand for about 7 or 8 months. And then I ended up having to go to hand therapy once or twice a week to get mobility into each finger. Because the way where it broke is like the center area where all the tendons combined.
Wow.
So yeah, exactly. So that crushed my dreams of being a musician. Because I mean, for even only the last probably couple years, I wasn't able to actually play guitar. I'll play guitar, but then my arthritis kicks in and it really hurts. So I quit playing music for that. And then because of how much guitar and building guitars really kind of helped me get through some tough times through being sick during my teenage years, I kind of really doubled down on guitar building, and that's what I wanted to do. So that's where I got really more into the guitar community. I was always a part of the guitar community in general, because it's the guitar community as a whole is such a fun place to be. It's such a weird interaction with such a wide selection of people. So I love being that. But after that incident and not being able to play, that's where I because you can easily type one-handed very slowly, but you can still type one-handed. So I ended up hanging around the Les Paul forum and solely on the Luther's corner, and then wanted to build more. And that's where I started getting more into physically modding guitars. So buying, the parts, and doing parts casters or anything like that. And then that's kind of how I segue into building harnesses. So I've always been a very cautious person. If I don't know what I'm doing, I overanalyze it, and I overthink it to the point where sometimes I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna buy a wiring harness. That's the easiest way, instead of doing it myself, because it's like I don't know what I'm doing. And then so I ended up buying just your generic 50s harness, because this is right when they started. You start seeing them on eBay, and so like back in the day, and then still to this day, on eBay, there's majority of the people who sell on eBay are your average Joes who are just kind of who have a very limited understanding of guitar wiring. and how it works. So, but they'll just copy a diagram and they'll just sell it as is. And a lot of times they'll even send you like a Dukin diagram as their own. So I ended up buying a wiring harness from this guy on eBay, and I had a generalized question on just about the install. And he was actually really cool. I like honesty. I love people who are like, if you don't know something, they flat out tell you instead of just come up with something.
Mm-hmm.
So this guy was like, yeah, I'm not sure. I just kind of copied this for extra money, and because he, I think, bought and sold guitars as well. So I did that. I was like, okay, well then I ended up figuring it out, and so I kept trying it on eBay, and more you find that it's like, okay, I did try a different seller this time, and it's still a guy who doesn't know about wiring harnesses, but sells it for that. And then I got to the point where it's like, okay, I just need to learn how to do this myself and get more comfortable. And I ended up at that time I was really good at doing your top 3 wiring styles for Gibsons, I should say. I've always only I'm still trying Fenders. I've bought a lot recently, and I'm getting the hang of them. But I've always been, and I love the sound of Gibson guitars. So the main style of wiring for Gibson guitars is you're going to be your 50s modern volume bleed, and back in those days I could do that really easily, and I understood them. And then so I was like, okay, if eBay is that person where it's just all people who sell harnesses are just your average Joes, I'll try somewhere else that's a little more professional and reputable. And then I ended up interacting with this gentleman in Les Paul form who was known as like the prodigy of wiring. And I wanted to do, it was kind of a craze at the time of when I did this, which was in Les Paul form, the Luther's Corner of making replica guitars, not like, blatant Gibson knockoffs, but like it was right when relic guitars became a thing. Like Tom Murphy was on his peak, and you could find people were making like a Jimmy Page number 2 replica of their own, or a Blackie replica. So I did that, and I ended up finding just a import Les Paul. That would be the easiest way to describe it. And I didn't age it, but I wanted to do the whole Jimmy Page setup, and I ended up buying this Jimmy Page wiring from this gentleman. And I had a really bad experience with that. And after that one moment, I was like, okay, I want to take this very serious, and I want to know how to do everything I can, or at least what I tried. I mean, to this day, I've been wiring guitars now for, easily 10 years, and I'm still learning. I'm still perfecting it, and I love when people challenge me. Shout out to Adam for challenging me on that Michael for that last Jazz Master wiring. That was a fun one because it's like I understand how it works, but there's certain, like, you have the idea of like how it works, but it doesn't always work how you think it works. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of troubleshoot it and rearrange it, and that it's kind of fun like that. So I've always, after that one moment in the Les Paul form, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna learn everything I can. And this is also the time where it's like I started to kind of I've always been a guitar flipper. I mean, even back in my teens, like that was an easiest way to get guitars you wanted. So it's like you'll find good deals on an Epiphone, you'll flip it or anything like that. So I always did that, and then I ended up trying to just do wiring harnesses because I at that point really understood how they worked, and I could help people out. So I started, selling them under just my own name, and not under any other company. And then about 2015, I should say 2014 or 15, I found out what made me so sick growing up, which is, it sounds really weird to say out loud, but it is my life now. But I found out that I am one of the rare people who have what you would call a sugar intolerance. So refined sugar basically makes me super super sick. It's like the way the doctor described it. It's like being diabetic but without being diabetic. So I ended up realizing, okay, sugar has kind of made me so sick over the years, and I cut it out on my diet, and all of a sudden it was like it's one of those weird moments. It's like you've felt so sick for all your life, and you've known, like growing up, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna make it past 30. Like if this is how I feel every day, that's like my body's gonna die. And then I hit to a point where it's like all of a sudden, I don't feel sick anymore, and it's all of a sudden this kind of, I say it's my being reborn. It is a kind of interesting thing. So at that point, I was like, okay, I want to do what I want to do. I spent too many times just wasting my time feeling so sick. I'm going to do whatever I want. And I ended up starting Gunstreet Guitar Emporium, which is what Gunstreet Wiring Shop was before the wiring harnesses took over. And my goal with Gunstreet Guitar Emporium was just going to sell vintage instruments and parts, and wiring harnesses were such a small aspect of it. And then I've always had the approach, just based off of my experiences dealing with wiring harnesses and other people producing wiring harnesses. So I always, when I produce a harness, one, my customers, I'm getting known for my customer service, is I really want to help out as much as you can. And as I've done this for, again, now I sold harnesses to the general public now for, I mean, at least 8 years. And between that, I probably made 3,000 plus harnesses, and I've interacted with so many people, in so many kind of different styles, if that makes sense. So like, you have I always love it because you always find the people are like, yeah, I know what I'm doing, I just want to save time. And I completely understand that, because I mean, I want to stress, it's like, if guitar builders out there, if you need help, contact me. I can save you. I mean, some of these harnesses I can save you hours, or just, I understand that completely when someone's like, oh yeah, I'm just trying to save time. But then you also get the aspect of someone who's like, oh, I've never done this, but I really want to try it. And so whenever I made my wiring harnesses before, I always went into it understanding that I need to aim towards a very wide demographic. And so I thought about me as 15, like what would I needed to know, and I kind of just went over the hill on how much I kind of help people out with customer service. And then another thing that kind of made Gunstreet kind of boom, or at least Gunstreet Wiring Shop boom, is I also really try to price. There is a very big side of the guitar wiring company or community that love to sell you parts based off of mojo, and they love to basically, I have to be very cautious about what I say, because I also want to say a disclaimer. It's like the views and opinion are my own, and I am not correct nor I'm wrong. It's just my own opinion based off of my own experiences. But there's a wide amount of people who end up using the same kind of parts, which is funny. But they will base their pricing off of mojo and not after real quality. So a lot of times you're going to spend an outrageous amount on a harness or just the kind of controls, because it's quote unquote, something like, pro pots, or they're perfectly matched and everything, which I will definitely do something talking about match pots for Gunstreet, because that is a very interesting kind of subject to talk about, and it's its own. I could probably talk the whole podcast about match pots. But I ended up saving a ton of money to get one of those kits when I was on the Les Paul forums, and I wanted to put it in this Les Paul I had. Actually, no, it wasn't my Les Paul, it was my SG, because my SG was my baby. So I ended up spending, I mean, it was it wasn't expensive. It took me a long time to get that, and then I ended up getting that pro pots, matched pots, and it didn't sound. It sounded no different than a my normal
Yeah.
CTS that I had there.
Hmm.
And the paper and oil capacitors sounded no different than any kind of nicer a nice quality potential, or not potential, but capacitor. And then that's the one thing I always want to stress is like what makes a quality harness isn't necessarily the parts. Quality harnesses, I think, is just the craftsmanship and how much detail it goes into. So when I make my Gunstreet products, and when I originally did it, back when it was Gunstreet Guitar Emporium, I based it off of, okay, I'm going to make it super customer friendly, user friendly. I'm going to price it realistically based off what it is. I don't care what the parts are. I'm going to make the harness as best as I can, no matter if you use the cheapest parts or the highest quality parts. And then I'm going to price it realistically. Like I have my set way of pricing, which is basically, the raw parts plus my hour labor, and that's it. I'm not going to upcharge it even more than that, and I can do that. So slowly but surely, it just kind of took off because people started to realize, okay, it's like if you're a newbie in guitar wiring, you can use his harness because he's got the diagram or the online instructions, or you can just ask him questions and he will walk you through it step by step. And then it got to the point now where it's like, okay, and I should also, only until recently have I've had a full-time job. I worked at a liquor store for 8 years, and the last year and a half I was the general manager. So it's like I had a full-time job, and on my free time I was doing Gunstreet just to kind of keep in the community
Hmm.
and really focus on that. So I I just lost my spot. So basically, I just ended up having to my free time was now only focusing on filling guitar wiring harness orders. So it's like, okay, now I can't spend time finding those vintage instruments I want. Now it's going to spend time where I got to build, 10 SG harnesses, 5 Les Paul harnesses, to the point where it's like, okay, I should just focus on wiring. And then that's when I rebranded, because I'm still so tiny, and I can get away with that, where I was like, okay, I'm not Gunstreet Guitar Emporium anymore. I'm now Gunstreet Wiring Shop. And I went from working 40 hours at my liquor store job to, okay, it went through 30 hours and then 23 hours. And then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I got to the point where now it's like, I have such great ideas of how I can expand on what my simple idea of just, superior customer service, realistic product dealing, and all that. So I have a great way I want to do that, but it's to the point where it's like I now need to focus solely on Gunstreet, and that's why all of a sudden I just kind of showed up in a lot of these communities, because it's like I really want to do something good, and I really want to interact with more people. I really want to learn more about how I can improve my own products and so on and so
Yeah.
forth.
Well, let me ask you this. So are you doing that still, or are you fully like doing the Gunstreet at this point?
So I'm technically doing Gunstreet full time, and then I've always been a hard worker, and I really like, it doesn't matter what job I do. I put myself into my work, and I really try to be the best. And then so the way that Oregon liquor stores work is the OLCC, because we're a controlled state, appoints an agent. So my agent, who's technically my boss, he was the coolest guy ever, or he is, because he's still around. And he let me get away with a lot of stuff because he knew how passionate I was about Gunstreet and all that kind of stuff. So I quit basically working full time there, and then I'll periodically go and help him out. I'm technically Gunstreet 100%. But like, if one of the other general managers is like, I need to go on vacation because I've worked, 4 months straight, I'll go and help out. Or if someone calls in, I'll go help out, because it's also the way I like to think about it now is like that's just kind of extra money that I can go buy a guitar with, or I can go do something extra income that I wasn't expecting. So I'll have a little bit of fun with that. But for the most part, Gunstreet is my full time. And then we're going to be working. I'm trying to get, we're doing I should say we, because it's mainly me. I'm doing more infrastructure projects to make Gunstreet even better. I'm really kind of working on the website at half the time, filling orders, and then the goal is to get into more guitar stores, and then also just help work with like guitar builders, kind of any way we can help. One of Gunstreet's biggest things is, and it's kind of my own experience in the community. Gunstreet's number one focus is the community. So like growing up, being a part of the community was like that one thing, again, that I'll probably say this a million times, but Gunstreet was the community was that one thing that like really helped me get through some hard times. So any way I can help other people out, I am like all for it. And plus, it's also really cool being in the community too, because it's like you meet really interesting people, and those interesting people have their own kind of things they do they love. Like I just recently worked with this guy named Eric to produce a video, an educational video about the wiring harnesses, and this guy's incredibly talented. But if you were to look at his subs, it's like, oh, he doesn't have anyone. But this guy's like, he's phenomenal. Everyone should go watch that video. It's a really excellently made video. So I try to use Gunstreet as a platform to also kind of help other people out and support other people. I mean, it's kind of like if you go to our website, we have our profit transparency, and it basically talks about how it's like all the profits we get from Gunstreet go back to either improving ourselves, whether that's like, improving how we produce the harnesses, or improving the user friendliness. And then the other aspect is, again, supporting the community. So that's like supporting people like Eric, who is a freelance videographer and is just kind of getting into it. And I would love to pay for him to produce a video because it was phenomenal. Or it's, supporting podcasts and interacting with people like you or 60 Cycle Hum and Gear Slum, the Tone Mob. It's like it's any way I can really help the community and actually just help individuals, because it's kind of funny being in the community, growing up into it. You see it one way, so it's like you see it as like, if I were to see this like as a third person, I'm like, oh man, Clifton, you're gigantic, you're huge, you make so much money from this. But in all actuality, this is a passion project. You love to do this just for the love of it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like any way I can help people like that and help them get motivation and kind of keep going. Because a lot of times this is hard. It's hard balancing working a full-time job, getting relationships with other people, of like significant others, or dealing with kids. It sometimes can be very overwhelming when you have to keep doing this. So any way I can help people keep that kind of passion and just even like, I mean, I could talk for hours about the community and how it's like so important to I mean, look at the platform you create and the groups of just people interacting.
Yeah, let me ask you, and I want to kind of bounce back to this in a second, but let me ask about, you're talking about the process of developing Gunstreet, and it went from the Guitar Emporium, and then it went to, the wiring only. And at what point did you know that, okay, I'm going to go after this, like, completely, this is all my eggs in this basket. I'm going to, I'm going to invest 100% of my time here. And kind of what was the progress of, making those decisions along the way, and then what aspect did community play in that for you?
So initially, I mean, I've always been very cautious about anything I've done, and also from my own experiences in having someone kind of, it takes a lot of nerve just to put yourself out there. Like just to put yourself out there in general for public opinion is very, very scary. And so for the most part, I've always been very insecure about my harnesses, or like not my harnesses, but my business in general. So for the last kind of 2 or 3 years, I really hid behind it. Like I never really kind of really pushed it to be out in the public, and I really kind of just let it be its own thing. But what slowly kept happening is like interacting with people. Like I love to talk to people. Sometimes I'm a weirdo because I spent so much time by myself and hiding behind books. But at the same time, I love to talk, and I love to ask people stories or about themselves. So more and more when I would talk to people who I would sell harnesses to, they would talk to me in a way that it's like they were stunned that I had never really pushed it. Like they would get the harness and be like, oh, well, I bought a harness from so and so, and yours completely beats it. And it was like to the point where it's like, okay, initially it's like, okay, thank you. I really appreciate that. I have a hard time accepting compliments, but I never really took it. And then more and more people are like, no, you really need to take this serious. And I would show people what I do, and I would show them, and they were always impressed. And then it was a lot of subtle experiences that kind of really kept the ball rolling. So it's like I went to, Gunstreet again is theoretically 3 years old, 3 years old. So I went to the local organ guitar expo when I was like a year into it, and the guy, I ordered a single space, so like you can request a certain area, and I ended up requesting this one area, and then I showed up, and the event guy ended up putting me right next to another guy, actually ironically enough from Bend, and he also produces wiring harnesses. He was just no different than how I started originally, which was guitars and then wiring harnesses with a small side. But so I ended up sitting next to this guy in this booth, and all day long, everyone was really kind of floored by my quality and my approach, and they talked to me in a way that was like, I'm bigger than I am. Like to this day, I don't think people really realize how small Gunstreet is. Like we are really tiny, and again, I'm full time, and I'm just enough to get me full time, and then a lot of times like Ashley and Mick will help me for free, like just doing it because they want to support me, or it's again like Mick's case, he loves hanging out and talking guitars with people. So Gunstreet is tiny, but the way that people were talking about me at that expo, or just even the guy next to me who was livid that I was next to him because that's what he was trying to do. Exactly. It was the ones like, okay, well, I think I'm onto something, so I'll try that. And then subtle more and more people were like, oh man, I love the way you do it. I love how easy it is. And then more and more people started talking about like my photos. I like to pretend I can take photography or do photography and make that. So they started talking about like, oh, you look like you're so much bigger than you are. And slowly but surely it's like, okay, I'll try it. And the orders keep going up, and to the point where like I'm getting exhausted because I mean there were certain times where I'd be working 80 plus hours between Gunstreet and the liquor store. So it was a little bit exhausting, and I got to the point where it's like it keep getting such positive reinforcement from people that I was like, okay, I'll just try small experiments, and I'll try doing I'll try sending. I ended up sending. So this is about the same time. It's like, okay, I'll sponsor Ryan and Steve at 60 Cycle Hum. Like, I wonder what that would be like. Just more to kind of try out my own, and because that was already 6 or 7 months ago, which is kind of weird to think about. And so that did that. People were more and more giving me compliments, being like, "Oh, that's really cool." So it's like all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, let's get this ball rolling. Let's try to actually do this. And to be fair, I do have, even though I didn't finish school, I do have a business background in some aspects. Not like I actually didn't go to school for it. I just went to a generic community college, but I've always been someone who's my wife loves to tease me because I love certain subjects, and I'll obsess about one subject to the point it's an echo chamber. So I have some understanding of how I should run a business, and also probably from just running the liquor store I work at, however you want to say it, is actually the third biggest in the whole state, and that's out of like 1,200 liquor stores. So I have that aspect, and I understand that concept. So I just kind of slowly put myself out there, and then I'm still very cautious, and I still am like, I am someone who's like, doesn't matter how many compliments you give me, I still see every negative detail about it, and I don't like it, so I don't believe it in a way.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So then more and more kind of cool things happen where it's all of a sudden like, okay, I went to the Tacoma Guitar Festival, and I drove like, Tacoma is like 6 hours away, right? And that was a big thing. Like that was the most like legit thing Gunstreet ever did at that point in time. And people started talking to me, and people started talking to us like we're this big company, and they kind of started talking to us in comparison to other big wiring companies. And in my head, I'm like, oh, but we're just kind of tiny. Like, oh, my wife better cut out there. But we're still so tiny, and it just, we're in my head, we're not really anything. And then all of a sudden, the second day, Paul Reed Smith happened to be at that expo because he was doing his own. I think he was doing like a thing of talking about vintage guitars and everything. And growing up, being a wannabe guitar builder, Paul Reed Smith was like my idol. Instead of like your normal teen posters I would have on the wall, I had pictures of like his Santana guitar and all that. So it's like it was really cool. And Paul Reed Smith is just walking around the booth, and I had the way this turned out, I just wanted to say hi to him, and nothing of that. So I ended up saying, "How's it going, Paul?" And he's like, "Hey, how's it going?" And then he walks into my booth and then starts talking to me and talks about my products. And then all of a sudden he's looking at me and he asks genuine questions. And he asked me, it was like that surreal moment. And he asked me, to get a little more context, the way Gunstreet works is I build things in batches. And with each batch, I get feedback from people. And that feedback helps me either change an individual pot or a capacitor, or just completely do a different approach, just because I gain more insight on how can I improve this more. And we get known for that. People are starting to recognize this is we use very large orange drop capacitors. And I'm gonna do it. This is a trade secret. I can't believe I'm putting this out. So the reason we use those capacitors is the fact that we kept getting feedback from people being like, I always read about these orange drops from people online, but I always imagined them being bigger because we use 600 volt, which is just a big version, and voltage has nothing to do with tone, and it's just solely just based off. A lot of times it's just associated with size. So we originally started out with like your basic, I can't remember now, it's like a 60 volt, and then we kept getting the comments like, I'm just let down. I always thought orange drops were gonna be more like candy, and I was like, oh, okay, that's funny. And then more and more happened. So then we changed from 60 volt to like 100, and then from 100 to 200, and then 200 to 3, and then by 300 it was like, okay, let's just find the biggest one we can. And we found out the 600 volt one we have, which is the perfect size for a hard candy. So the reason why we use 600 volt orange drop capacitors has nothing to do with the sound, and solely based off it looks like candy. So I did that, and I had that harness, one of those harnesses out, and it was through our new packaging that we just did, which a lot of people also loved, which is really kind of cool. So Paul Reed Smith grabs my harness and goes, "So why are you using 600 volts on a harness that at max would do less than a volt. And I flat out was like, because it looks like candy. And he laughs and goes, "Yep, that's the right answer." So it was like that one, yeah, exactly. That one experience of like my childhood idols, like, said something phenomenal. And I also had my Les Paul, my 59 Les Paul that I built for the first time ever. And I had that there. And he's like, "Oh," he's looking at it and he's like, "Oh, what's that?" And I was like, "Oh, I pretend I can build guitars." And he's like, I hand it to him. And he ends up looking at it. He's like, "You built this?" And I was like, yeah. He's like, "Well, obviously you can build guitars." So it's just that positive experience. So after that, I was like, I called like 4 or 5 people telling, like, bragging, like, "Paul Reed Smith just checked out my products and he loved them." And then I was like, okay, let's take this serious even more. And then I ended up kind of interacting more with the people. And I've always loved podcasts. And I always love just like, I love people who just talk. Like, there's nothing better than just like people interacting in the back and forth that happens like that. So I was listening to the Guitar Nerds, and this was actually, I technically was listening to all of them. So 60 Cycle and Gear Slum, and I actually met oh man, I can't think of his name right now, but I met him at the Tacoma and we talked about the Gear Slum, and then so I ended up contacting the Guitar Nerds for some random reason instead of 60 or Gear, and I sent a harness to Matt Knight. Okay. Which if you know Matt Knight's background, like he's pretty like big in the community in general, and especially in just the guitar marketing, or not guitar marketing, but just he's what is he, head of Boss Pedals Europe? He works for Boss Pedals. We'll just say that.
Yeah.
And he gave me like the best review I think I've ever gotten, and he was just floored by my harness, down to like the presentation, how I did it. I mean, a lot of it's kind of hard because I have a lot of like secrets that I've done to the harnesses to make them the way they are. And it's been a lot of subtle adjustments. And then at this recent kind of that last kind of push, it just it blew up, and got the best review. And then I was like, okay, well, that was phenomenal. Let's try another person. And then I kept getting more and more people just talking about my harnesses and talking about me in a way that I've never really, it's such a weird experience when people talk about you in third person. I'm assuming you've dealt with that when listening to other people talk about your podcast.
Sure.
And so it's like, it's weird when someone talks about you and says like, my attention to detail is better than other people. My Blake from the Tone Mob was like, "Hey, that's a really spiffy harness." It was really cool that people interacted with me. And then that's where I was just like, okay, at this point, like, I'm doing it basically full time just out of necessity. And then I had these ideas about how I wanted to like, the way Gunstreet, if Gunstreet keeps going the way it's going, it will be a really important thing for just in general educating the community. Like, I really want to work heavily with people to produce content that helps, like Eric's teaches you the difference between 50s modern volume bleed, which not many people have done, or if they do, it's usually 50s versus modern. But I also want to do more about I don't want to get too into it just in case, because I've already other wiring companies are paying attention to me, which is again also a very interesting thing to interact with. But I really want to change the way, if Gunstreet keeps going, I want to focus heavily more on just doing something really good for the community. And at that point, it was like, okay, me and my wife had been planning a vacation for like 3 years where we're going to go to Europe, and we went to London, we went to Edinburgh, and then we went to Ireland because my family's from Ireland, and we went and I visited my great grandfather's storefront that they were there for 200 years. So I did that one thing as this kind of like big kind of a last kind of hurrah of Liquor World. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, once I get back from that vacation, Gunstreet is like my number one goal. I eat, sleep, and die for Gunstreet and what it can do for people, because it is something that it's bigger than myself, and I hate saying that I am Gunstreet, because I'm in my head Gunstreet is not me. It's this idea of morality, and it's the idea of doing something positive and taking other people's love for guitar modding and guitar building, and helping to promote that in a positive way, and not a predatorial way where I'm taking your money and using that money to buy
Right.
a mini mansion. And then again, I've growing up in the community, I also just want to have a way that I can also give back, because whether we realize it or not, there's a lot of people in the community that are struggling and might not be as mentally healthy as you would expect. And any kind of way that it's kind of weird when I talk about it, because it's like it's really aimed for myself at 15, because nowadays I'm night and day different. But there's a lot of times it was hit or miss when I was a teenager. So any way I can help promote something that keeps dialogue with other people, and promote them talking about guitars, because guitars are a powerful thing, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's kind of the launching pad. I think if it wasn't like all these entrepreneurs like yourself, if it wasn't guitar, it'd be something else. But it's a community behind it. It's the people, and it's the culture, and even you were sharing like you were talking about how at different points along the way it was the community that helped steer you towards, I'm going to do this way, and it was the affirmation and the feedback that helped propel you into where you're doing this full time. And
Yep.
I loved what you had to say about it was the fact that you chose from an entrepreneurial level to do things with excellence,
hmm
and that it seemed like you were doing way more than actually the point you were at.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's what's important, like with anything, is
Yeah.
like it's not really necessarily faking it, but faking it till you make it, and
I
doing the
absolutely.
absolute best job you can with what you've got.
I'm a classical, what you'd call, imposter syndrome. Like I think I'm a fraud to the point where I overcompensate, and then I become that person who people or who I think I'm supposed to be. By no means, and I want to stress, it's like by no means am I perfect. Like I'm not this wiring prodigy. I can do enough that I get in trouble. But a lot of times I just get out of trouble barely. But I mean, like you said, I'm I want to do something bigger than myself, and I want to get to a point, especially with Gunstreet, where I want to produce maybe custom harnesses. Like I've done this for 10 years now, and it's like it's sometimes it will get really monotonous about just doing that simple. So it's like I love doing the custom shop stuff, because then people are like, they test me, and I always love to do that. And I would love to get to a point where it's like, okay, maybe I only do custom shop and I have someone else do my generic, our off the shelf harnesses, and I can focus more on the kind of, I keep saying this, but the community side, and focus more on finding people to help me do this, because I mean I have a master plan for Gunstreet that is very vast and very long, but I'm yet to a point. It's not a matter of if, but it's more a matter of a when.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so where do you see kind of like what's next on your horizon?
For the most part, I really am trying to. The way I'm going now, it's hard to say, because it changes day to day, and it's like now I've gotten to the point where I am interacting with other wiring companies, and they are interacting with me and paying attention to me. So it's like I start doing something one way, and then all of a sudden those companies, which again I want to stress, so I'm not bad mouthing any companies because they are just like me, a small business, and we're all trying to get a small portion of the bigger picture. So when they think that I'm doing something different, they'll change themselves to be different. So it's like, I come out where I'm at, and then all of a sudden they change to kind of improve themselves. So it's hard to say completely, but I have a feeling it's really going to turn with Gunstreet. It's really going to turn into at least where I want to do it is more focused on the individuals. So I want to focus it more on like, supporting someone building and modding guitars. Like, I did my little blogs online, which we called the shop builds. I would love to see someone do that and see if I can support them in a way that just kind of cool. It's fun to do that kind of stuff. And then again, I want to do more aspects. I want to help out more guitar builders, and see. It's like another one of those ones where it's like you see such passion in people. So if there's any way I can help those really passionate guitar builders, I would love to work with them. And again, I'm not really doing this for money, more or less kind of passion and kind of to promote and help other people out. So that was another aspect. And then the biggest thing which will help me is I got to get more into I'm trying to get into more guitar stores, because that's another kind of love for the mom and pops. Mm-hmm. Like that's the number one overlooked kind of thing is like, I want to help promote them and help get them sales. But mom and pop shops also, I can help them any way I can. But the goal is, I hate saying it because I hate being that person. It's like, I need to sell more so I can help grow everything else. But I don't know. I have a lot. I have my whole, you can't see it, but I have like my project management list of where I'm going, and I have small things clicked off, but the goal of Gunstreet is to do something important to both educate the community in a positive way, to support the community in a positive way, whether I can help, again, like Eric, to hire someone to help me do my goal. So Gunstreet at this point is turning into, it's kind of really cool to watch it do it too, is kind of turning into this kind of force in the community to help promote the community, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's something, I've had this conversation with like other builders and stuff, mm-hmm. but like there's this sense, especially like in the boutique world, mm-hmm. that the faceless companies that just big conglomerates that are owned by other companies, whatever, and they seem to control the market. There seems mm-hmm. to be this hope that, things are changing, and it's been over the course of last several years, but things are changing, things are moving. I think that there will be a piece of the pie, maybe even it's small, just for, a guy to make a living doing something he loves. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of where the industry's heading, I think. And, it's like going to NAMM, like even Summer NAMM, this like way smaller show. You go there and there's this sense that the bigger companies don't need to be there.
Yeah.
Because everybody knows. And I mean, they could cut those distribution deals on a phone,
Yeah, absolutely.
But the boutique guys need that sense of community, and that networking,
I've also noticed, just being, again, like I've been obsessive about the guitar community since I was like 15, and I've also watched as we went from the dominance of like places like Guitar Center, to now you see this resurgent of, I hate using the term, but millennials, using the power of internet and just technology. But you see this resurgence of mom and pop shops kind of coming out and starting to dominate, and bigger chains are really kind of starting to hurt because, again, like if you think about any kind of life cycle of a business, is what really kills bigger businesses is the fact that like customers become educated. You know what I mean? Like they become to a point where it's like they know the importance of the smaller guys, and they understand that a lot of the innovation is from the smaller guys. So you see the shift. At least I've always saw the shift of changing from like big companies to all of a sudden those really kind of rock star boutique builders, and they become their own kind of, I hate saying it, but like a meme with themselves. So I definitely see that the market is definitely changing to favor boutique builders, and especially you have a point where you have a platform of all these kind of people like yourself, where they have their following, and these people who are technically really small, and you don't realize how small they have that opportunity to be exposed by you guys, and then they have their moments. I mean, there's some builders I accidentally stumbled upon because some random person found them and just talks amazing about them. And then all of a sudden you see like there's this guy named Alex Sorkin. I probably said his name wrong, but there's this. He's from Canada, and he builds obsessive compulsive replicas of vintage Les Pauls, so like a 52 gold top. And he goes above and beyond on his quality. And he originally started out just kind of doing it for side, and then all of a sudden you see these people just start and flock to this guy because you see the passion and the sincerity of him. And it just kind of, it's cool that we now live in a platform area that you can do that. Oh, who was that? There was that builder. I feel really, Emily Harris just posted in the Facebook group. Tuna Instruments.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a prime example. It's like this little known builder, and someone just flat out posted her stuff, and that guitar is phenomenal. You know what I mean? It is such a cool, interesting guitar, and it's just like we live in a society that's all it takes. It's just putting yourself out there, and anyone can do it as long as you just try.
Yeah, and that's way cool. It's just kind of the age we live in, where even like to be able to have these groups and communities where all these people from coast to coast are meeting through that, and then I don't know, the gear community is just a really interesting place right now.
It's actually, and it's also what I also like about at least Facebook groups that I've noticed is there's not as many trolls, and it's really tight knit, and there's a lot of people who are really, it's open, it's really nice, and people are nice. I think that's my favorite part about, at least recently, in interacting with all these Facebook groups.
Yeah, totally. And so I really hope that the boutique community kind of keeps that up, because I've mentioned this before, but it's like I really hope that the bubble never pops.
Oh yeah, or at least it will pop, but it will just shrink. It will never die.
Right.
I always love it when people are like, "Oh, guitars are dying," and everyone's like, "That's like no, guitar's changing, but it's never gonna die. It is too ingrained. Like as long as there's music, there's always gonna be someone wanting to produce it."
Yeah, yes, it's true, and it's, you know, people do it for the love of it, not for the wealth and fame.
Yeah, well, absolutely. A lot of times you always fail if you're doing it. At least my opinion is like if you're really doing it for money, you never really understand why you want to do it in the first place. So it's like if you want to be successful, you gotta love it as a whole and not because you want to be famous. If you want, everyone wants. Actually, I don't. To be honest, if I could go back, I would love to be like the anonymous person from Gunstreet, because it's like it's weird being out in public. But I mean, if you kind of have to, and you have to, you got to be sincere about doing this, and you have to love it, and you got to sincerely put yourself out there. Because again, if you're doing it for money, it's very apparent, and people are very people really take on notice when you're doing it for money. At least I've always seemed like it. I always like see people, I'm like, oh, that's just a big business.
Yeah, totally.
Even if they look small.
Yeah, I think that's part of the new entrepreneurialism is like people want to see the depth behind this, and they want to know the story behind it. And if it's not authentic, people don't usually hang with it.
Hmm. I'm also a firm believer of a lot of times like the fame changes it. So it's like you're now when you start out, you're in the trenches and you understand why you're doing it, and then you get to this point where it's like, okay, now you're doing it because you have to, and you're doing it for money, and then you lose grasp of why you originally do it, and then it turns into like that bloated band that's like they started out so indie and so phenomenal, now they're just kind of producing music just because they have to by contract.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good analogy. Awesome, man. I'm so excited that we get to spend just a little while talking about why you're doing what you're doing, and getting to know the story behind the wiring harnesses, because the
Mhm.
wiring harnesses is the thing. It could be that, or building guitars or whatever, but it's really about making an impact in the community that you're in.
No, absolutely. And if I it doesn't matter what I do, I think I'd always end up doing some. I think I'd always end up trying to help out the community, even if I never had my own business in associated with the guitar community. I don't know. I definitely am. It's very important to me, and I really love it, and I am very passionate about it.
Awesome. Well, tell everybody um, where they can find your product, and how they can stay connected with you and what you're doing.
Well, you can either find us online at gunstreetwiringshop.com. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook. Make sure to hit a like on that. You can also find us at your local guitar store. If you don't see us at your local guitar store, make sure you can ask for us. We love to get contacted by guitar stores in general. Just make sure you ask for us, Gunstreet Wiring Shop, because there is a bunch of us out there. And then again, you can find us Facebook. We don't do too much on Facebook. We're mainly doing Instagram. And then, yeah, interact with us wherever you want. Email us. All information is online.
Awesome, awesome. And likewise, if you've listened to this episode by way of knowing Sean and following him, come check out the show. We've got a really cool Facebook group where we discuss a lot of all these episodes, and on Instagram, YouTube, and Patreon, and just feel free to check that out. And if you like what you hear, subscribe to us and follow us. And love to have you all the community is part of the discussion. And so thank you again,
Exactly.
Sean.
Absolutely. Although I have one last bone to pick with you, Clifton.
Sure.
You have the most catchy intro. Anytime I listen to your podcast, I get that stuck in my head the whole podcast. You guys are talking along, and all of a sudden I can think about, oh, I am a whirly bird.
Yeah, that I wish I could take credit for that, but that's again, that's part of the community that contributed that. And that
Absolutely.
was Vanen, and he's from South Africa.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, I had him on the show, and I was actually a guest on his show originally,
Mhm.
and then as I launched the podcast and had him on my show a few episodes in, and he wrote that song for me, and I just thought, like, wow, he really hit like what the show is about, like, just in it. And so,
It's
and then
perfect.
Nick View did some overdubs on that.
He did the
And
slide, right?
yeah, he did the slide work. And yeah, and so actually, other than putting that together, that's actually not me singing or playing or anything. And so I love it. I love
Yeah.
that it's all
I bet you a
community
lot of
driven.
people think it's you.
They do, and I think it was Vannon's attempt at he kind of hitting that southern voice a little bit,
Uh-huh.
but it is totally not me singing. And so, but I love it that way. I think
Oh
it
yeah.
tells the story. And
It's definitely you. It's
y-
definitely your show.
yeah, yeah, and so it's been just such a awesome thing to the whirly birds, just seeing all the people that pop up in that community. And it's been fun.
Oh, absolutely. Join the community. We're nice.
Yes, be part of the discussion, and it's if you don't know what it means to be a whirly bird, it won't take long, but yeah. So, well, thanks again, man.
Of course. Thanks for having me on.